All right, ladies and gentlemen, we move now to our second topic of the morning still. The topic, building beautifully from where Hein had left us, is building futures, pathways to economic activity. That is building futures, pathways to economic activity. And this is in partnership with Absa. As per our pattern, we're going to start off with a sponsor introduction. We're going to be hearing very shortly from the Group Marketing and Corporate Affairs Head, also responsible for strategic transformation and partnerships at Absa, and that is Clement Mutale, who's going to give that introduction. And once Clement has given the introduction, we then transition to our panel. Remember that we're also going to kick that off with a poll to get a reading in the room of where we are. I did want to just also very quickly pick up on a comment that somebody made around the poll. That's Ida says, my comment is this: the poll was a trick question. All of the choices are valid, especially if we're taking a systems thinking approach. There may be priorities, and so once engaging the system, different factors will be more important than others during the process. And so the key, says Ida, is to be open to feedback to the system as the interventions take place. Ida, thank you so much. And with that, can we give Clement Motala a big round of applause as he comes up? Let's give him energy as he comes up. It's always great to get good energy. Thanks, Clement. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel I said to Nontanza Makakula just to out her. I thought she liked me. And clearly she doesn't. You know, how do you put me after Hein? Like, really? If you liked me. And my assistant said to me, you're going to meet a bunch of really, really powerful people who make a really meaningful difference in society. You must wear a suit and tie. And this morning I woke up and I thought, geez, like, I can't imagine people who do what you guys do that in suits and ties. I would look so odd in the room coming in a suit and tie, so I decided to look the part. So I hope I'm not overdressed, for the occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Clement Motali. The introduction and my title was very long. That's not it, but I take it and I receive for the future. I might just get there. Colleagues, inclusion in its many, many forms is the single biggest challenge and issue of our time. When we speak about financial inclusion, particularly when you talk about, when we talk about it in financial institution circles, it is often framed in terms of access to banking, or banking accounts, to credit, to financial services. Whilst all of that actually really matters and the progress we've made really matters, it's only one part of a much bigger picture. The more important question is not simply whether people can enter the financial system, but rather whether they can meaningfully participate in the economy once they're there. And I think the biggest challenge is we see it with graduates. We get them through a system, and then they just can't get through the next part of of that system. And I think that's kind of what we need to think about. Across the continent, social pressure and economic constraints are no longer separate conversations. Youth unemployment, inequality, and limited access to opportunity are converging and reshaping what sustainable growth looks like. And in this room, we might be thinking about it from a South African perspective. We're a Pan-African bank. We, aptly think about it from a Pan-African point of view. So for us at Absa, the question is simple. Can economic growth be sustained without meaningful inclusion? Our view is that it cannot. So these questions become even more urgent when we consider the structural nature of youth unemployment in South Africa and across the African continent. We know a lot more about it because we are based here, but actually we've got operations across the continent. The challenges are the same. And youth unemployment is, a scourge that we all have to deal with. It is deep. So this is a short-term challenge that shall not resolve itself, with time. It is deeply embedded. And it shapes not only economic outcomes, but how young people see themselves in relation to available opportunity. And Hein spoke about, how one sees opportunity and how one kind of gets through that. It is within this context that entrepreneurship becomes a critical part of the solution, not as a catch-all answer, because sometimes we can focus on one thing as the solution, and certainly not as a romanticized alternative to employment, but as a practical and credible pathway into economic participation. Entrepreneurship at its best shifts individuals from being passive participants in the economy to active contributors. It creates space for agency, for problem solving, and ultimately for value creation. This is where entrepreneurship becomes not just relevant, but essential. And that's why at Absa, we clearly focused our attention on entrepreneurship as a core for how we would actually drive meaningful change. The work is not only about producing more startups, although that is certainly part of the ambition. It is more fundamentally about equipping young people with the capabilities that hold real economic value. The ability to recognize opportunity where others see constraint, the confidence to solve practical everyday problems, the discipline to think commercially, and the resilience to navigate risk with maturity. You can tell, this speech was written by a banker. There has to be risk somewhere in there, So at Absa, our approach is grounded in a simple but important understanding. Entrepreneurship is not a single moment of intervention. It is a journey, and like any meaningful journey, it requires different forms of support at different stages. That is why our strategy is structured around a three-tiered model, allowing us to engage across the full continuum of development. So I'll talk to those fairly quickly. Firstly, at a foundation level, the focus is on early exposure, creating pathways within the education system, where entrepreneurial thinking can start to take root. Here we demonstrate the importance of identifying a need or an issue to be solved for. Because, and I said to somebody else, entrepreneurs don't go into this for money. They go into this to try and solve a societal problem or an issue, right? So in this context, we are trying to make sure that people understand what the real need is or the real issue is that needs to be solved for. To consider solutions of solving that issue, in essence, developing a problem, solving skills. We are teaching our youth to be solutionist in their approach to life. Secondly, in the second tier, this is where we position entrepreneurship as a potential career choice. I wish when I was in school that this was a path provided to me. I was only told I must go varsity and work, and I wish I had this choice. We target youth in higher education and training institutions to ask the question, where to post your qualification? Here, the emphasis on developing practical skills, strengthening confidence, and deepening business understanding to increase the intent of youth to start their enterprises. And last year I was exposed to a number of those initiatives that we partner with a number of organizations on, where these kids are going to leave university already, and having started to create jobs. And that's what we want, given the challenges that we have in this country. And lastly, the third tier is where venture support becomes critical. This is the point at which ideas meet realities of the market, and where access to funding, mentorship, and networks can determine whether a business is set up to grow sustainably and thrive or not. So the intention behind this model is deliberate, because if we only intervene at the point of funding, we have arrived too late in the journey. So if we limit ourselves to early inspiration without sustained support, we leave potential unrealized. This approach is not theoretical. So just a couple of proof points. I see you looking at me like, give me something to hold on to, proof points. So just a couple of proof points. In 2025 alone, at Absa, we invested over 373 million in corporate citizenship initiatives. So that's not a small amount. Fully focused on youth and women, and particularly driving entrepreneurial intent and action. And we've reached over 366,000 people across education, entrepreneurship, and financial inclusion. More than 74,000 young people were supported through education and work readiness initiatives, one of which is called Ready to Work, including over 5,000 SMEs, mainly youth and women-led enterprises, where we provided access to markets, finance, and mentorship. Our financial education initiatives reached over 237,000 people with measurable improvements in financial competency. from just over 15% to more than 85% amongst participants. So importantly, the work does not sit alongside our business. The work we do does not sit alongside our business. It's embedded within it. In 2025, we mobilized across the entire Absa ecosystem 53.5 billion rands in sustainable finance to drive economic and social outcomes. So it's a big number, in this country. So to close off, Sisi, our ambition is firmly Pan-African, recognizing that the structural challenge of youth unemployment is shared across the continent. Through partnerships such as the Allen and Jill Gray Philanthropies, the University of South Africa, and the Department of Basic Education, we are working to influence not only individual outcomes, but systems themselves. You will hear about some of the work during the panel sessions from my colleague, Nonhlanhla. For us, the test of our contribution will never be the scale of our commitments. We're a bank. We can commit big numbers, but that's not the story or the end of the story. But whether our investments help build futures that are resilient, inclusive, and economically viable over a period of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Clement. And I think a lot of what you've said is given us pathways for a much richer conversation that we're about to have now with our panelists as we really now double click on this question of building futures and looking at pathways to economic activity. Please, may I welcome my panelists to kindly please join me on stage. Nonhlanhla Makakula, the head of corporate citizenship programs at Absa, joins us. Welcome, Nonhlanhla. Zimkhitha Peter, the Chief Executive Officer of Allen and Jill Gray Philanthropies, is here as well. Dr. Edwell Gumbo, the Director of Entrepreneurship at University South Africa. And we wrap up the panel with Lerato Tladi. Lerato is the founder of Hunadi Air Conditioning and Refrigeration. She is an entrepreneur. She's also the winner of the Allen and Jill Gray Philanthropy Absa-funded TVET Inter-College Competition for 2025. Edwell, I'm curious about that seat change, but I'll figure it out. For now, though, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start off with our poll, just as a way of anchoring ourselves into the conversation. It should be popping up on your device and online now. And the question is, when you think about what young South Africans most need to become successful entrepreneurs, what young South Africans most need to become successful entrepreneurs, what do you think is the most critical ingredients? And so I want to make sure that I can see it as well as it pops up, and it should be up on the app very shortly. It is there. There are a couple of options. I'm going to lower this. I do apologize. There's a huge sticker that says, "Do not touch me," but I cannot see past you. So I will do that. And there we have it. We have our options. What is the most critical ingredient? Is it an entrepreneurial mindset and self-belief? Is it practical business skills and startup resources? Clement speaks about wanting to see more startups, but that not being the end goal on its own. Is it about access to finance? Is it about supportive networks and mentorship? Is it a more enabling regulatory and market environment? Is it access to markets and potential customers? Or is it exposure to entrepreneurial role models? As always, I'm going to let that run. And what I'll do is that I'll integrate it back into the conversation in a short while. But at the moment, I've got about 75, 79, 80 fingers participating in that poll, and I'd love to see that number rise a little bit. I know that we are close to 400 people here in Johannesburg, and of course, we still have hundreds online as well. So if I can implore you to lean into this invitation and participate, it makes for a much richer reading of those results. Thank you for making the time. And of course, a quick reminder, green button for your questions so that I can integrate your voice into the conversation. Nonhlanhla, let me start off with you. You've witnessed entrepreneurial education from several institutional perspectives. In your view, what, if anything, has most meaningfully shifted in the entrepreneurial space? And what does that evolution tell us about what it is that we need from entrepreneurial education right now?
Thank you, Nozipho, for the question. Afternoon, colleagues. I think where I want to start is where Clement left off. I think when we talk about financial inclusion through entrepreneurship, we're not saying every young person must be an entrepreneur. I think we realize that it's not a silver bullet. We realize that entrepreneurship is not necessarily for everyone. I think it's important to start there, because when you say, yeah, they are entrepreneurship people, they want every young person to start a business, that's not what we're saying, right? And I mean, when we say financial inclusion through entrepreneurship, we speak about delivering entrepreneurship education. So when we talk about entrepreneurship education, we are saying we are wanting our young people to show up differently, right? We are saying we are wanting a generation of young people who've got agency, young people who say, I've got a couple of choices before me. How do I pick the best choice? We are wanting young people who are not hampered by the challenges and the problems that they're facing in their communities, but young people that say, actually, what is in my hand and what can I do with it? Which is what Hein reminded us this morning. So that's what we are trying to do, to say whether they then go start a business or whether they then go into a workplace, they show up differently. With that being said, Nozipho, in terms of some of the shifts that we are seeing in the space, which are quite key, one, we are seeing that a whole lot more funders are in the space. I mean, I saw it Dumeling here from SAB. You know, we are together in these streets of entrepreneurship. Yeah. And what it then means is that, you know, different funders are seeing it as a potential way of including young people into the space. What it means is that there's great opportunity for collaboration as well. The second shift we are seeing is a move from almost this, okay, I just do skills development, or I just give funding, or I just do X, right? Where funders are saying, actually, there's an ecosystem that's important in supporting this young person. I mean, if you look at the model by Daniel from Babson College, I mean, it speaks about a number of components that are important to enable thriving entrepreneurship, right? Access to funding, access to market, access to networks. There are various components that are critical, and a critical shift is saying, but I can't just start here. What happens to the rest? If we don't support and we just give funding, then are we enabling thriving entrepreneurship? So that's another key shift that you are seeing in the space. But a critical one is that we have shifted from outcomes, from inputs and activities to outcomes. Yeah. Right? And I think it's a challenge to the colleagues in the room, and not just about entrepreneurship, but saying how funders are funding, are saying, okay, great, you're going to train and then what? Right? You're going to deliver these activities and then what? Yeah. Right? Because at the end of the day, we want to know that what we are investing in is translating into these young people being integrated into the economy and being meaningful participants of the economy. So I'd say those three things, Nozipho, are key in terms of what we are seeing in this space.
And I hope, Nonhlanhla, that we get an opportunity to speak to some of the complexities that then that introduces, because those are not easy evolutions. I mean, if you talk about just the first point, to say, you know, it's not about every entrepreneur setting up an enterprise. It is about thinking entrepreneurially, sometimes even within the context of employment. How do we then measure that if it hasn't directly translated into an enterprise? And so I think there's a lot of complexity that comes with, but I think those evolution points that you raise are very, very well noted. And also just the emphasis that the end that we're looking for is meaningful participation in the economy. Correct. In whatever form that might look like. Zimkita, let me bring you in here. And I know this is a little bit of an unfair question, because it's always the nature versus nurture question. It's the chicken and the egg question. Which one do you do first in entrepreneurship? And so I'm keen to understand from you, how do the Ellen and Jill Gray philanthropies programs navigate the choice you need to make between identifying and investing in talented individuals for whom you are already seeing entrepreneurial possibility, versus bringing entrepreneurial skills and thinking into a space where it is evident that they may not exist at that point? So which do you do first, and which do you prioritize?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question, and good morning, colleagues. Someone was once asked, are entrepreneurs born or made? And the answer is that I've never met an unborn entrepreneur. So and funny enough, we don't ask this about any other profession. So maybe first
Yes.
let's start saying there are three things that are important in entrepreneurship development. The first is the person themselves, their thinking, their mindset, their agency, and all of that. There are a couple of things that I do think are innate in certain people. I think this gets asked about sports.
Yes.
Can you train all of us to be Chetly Claw, or does his lungs have a bit of an advantage that maybe the rest of us? I think we ask that when it comes to sports. Do people that excel in sporting activities, are they like that because they train better or do better things than the average person, or is there some natural? So I think we'll forever sit maybe in one way or the other. The second one is the process. That means the process that the person does to start a business and to grow a business, the process that they follow in doing that. Do they have mentors? Do they have networks and all of that? And then the last one Nhlanhla was also talking about is the ecosystem itself.
Sure.
Because the kind of environment, social, political, economical, that will place that young person, the policy environment, all of those three things matter: the person, the process, and that. So I think what we have tried to do at Ellen Gray is to understand what are the competencies or the mindsets that a young person needs to potentially have, and which one of those can be developed through the program. And then say what kind of exposure do they need to have.
Yeah.
And Nhlanhla was talking about outcomes, that we can have three outcomes. The first outcome can be if this young person can, through this process, develop an entrepreneurial mindset that at least allows them to make a difference wherever they are, whether they start a business or not. But I think all of us, wherever we're employed, we understand the importance of this mindset.
Sure.
We understand how it's important in your own career trajectory. And if then the second outcome, if they decide to start a business, but I do think that the most important thing is to give every young person who aspires to be an entrepreneur the chance, at the very least, the chance to be able to start and to succeed in that journey.
And what I'm hearing you say is, Mkita, is that part of the opportunity then is to make that chance accessible.
Yes.
For those who want to step into that opportunity. And I think even as you're speaking about the ecosystem, when Nhlanhla had raised it, I put a note to say, must reference back the poll, because the ecosystem in itself kind of says that it's everything in the poll that has been listed and that needs to be part of the ecosystem to create that chance and to create those conditions for young people to step into entrepreneurship. And so Lerato, I'm going to come to you last, because I think the beauty of having you on the panel is that you get to test and give me an honest reflection whether all these people on the stage are actually telling the truth or not, because you're able to give us an honest reflection as an entrepreneur. So I'm going to go to Dr. Edwell next, because there's a lot of research about the potential for formal entrepreneurial education. And there's some research that would argue that it creates those pathways, and other research says it might fall short. I'm keen in understanding, Edwell, from your perspective, what is the evidence telling us in particular about how we should be thinking about the design of entrepreneurial education in formal institutions for it to really have the impact that we envision?
Yeah, thank you so much, and good afternoon, colleagues. I think firstly, the evidence is clear that formal entrepreneurship matters.
Okay.
But let's not overclaim what it can do and what it cannot do. It will not automatically produce entrepreneurs. But what it can do is, on a skilling path, it will help with entrepreneurs or young people to be able to recognize solutions. Firstly, identify problems and come up with solutions that are aligned with those problems. It will also build confidence. Like, for example, think about an entrepreneur who comes from a very technical background. What they know in their world is a laboratory. But now when we talk of moving into entrepreneurship, you're now talking commercial language,
Yeah.
talking to investors. and even talking to clients and markets. That's a different language altogether. And this is where entrepreneurship education comes in. So evidence is clear that there is value for entrepreneurship education. And what we have seen at EDHE, Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education, is that we are very much aware that we're not going to produce entrepreneurs immediately, but it's on a journey, a trajectory of training, of embedding entrepreneurial thinking into the mindset of the university students, that by the time they graduate, some would already have businesses. Some actually enroll at universities with running businesses. Some will start running businesses as university students, trying to supplement the little income that they get. And those businesses start growing, they start employing people. Some will graduate and go into the workplace, but they will have the entrepreneurial mindset and competencies that later on in life they can actually tap into to run entrepreneurial ventures. And my last point then will be, I think what we also claim to do, or in terms of entrepreneurship education, we also measure wrong outcomes. We're looking for short-term solutions. Even if you look at the short-term KPIs that most of the organizations set, short-term in nature, but they're not looking at a long-term venture creation. That is a long game instead of a short game.
I want to double click very quickly before I move on, Edward. I love the clarity on yes, it matters, and the sober mindedness around, but we're not going to overclaim what it can and cannot do. There's always the underlying current of when does it matter most? And I know we're speaking at a university level now, but there's also an argument that says we should be introducing formal entrepreneurial education a lot earlier to young people. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. Let me give you a scenario. The common language that says entrepreneurs, the top entrepreneurs, started their startups in a garage, for example. How do I see a garage? If you look at even the world-leading entrepreneurs, what was the garage? It's available facilities with access to resources and tools. And most of our young people don't have access to that. Yes, it's important that we embed the entrepreneurial thinking right from basic education. But where I'm coming from, education space, higher education, we train teachers at our universities. So we want to embed the entrepreneurial thinking to teachers, that by the time they go to they go to schools to teach, they themselves think entrepreneurial because they have an influence. Traditionally, our education system, unfortunately, has been designed in such a way that you go to school, you work hard, you pass, you go to university and you get a job. And that has been it traditionally, but we're changing that by embedding entrepreneurship in the teaching of any subject that the teachers in basic education teach, as well as our academics at our universities.
And well, that's really useful, and I'm glad that we went there because I think it allows us to close the loop on that conversation. So, Lerato, as I bring you in, I want to take us back to some of the language that Clement used when he started, which I thought was important. And he spoke about us not thinking that entrepreneurship is a catch-all, that we don't romanticize entrepreneurship as an alternative to employment. Nonhlanhla added to this, where she started by saying it's not a silver bullet. And so my question to you is, from the outside, entrepreneurship can always look like a package, like opportunity, like financial freedom, like all of the beautiful things about entrepreneurship, but not always getting the real experience of what it actually takes to run and sustain a business. My question to you is, let's talk about the programs you participated in and the extent to which you feel they have effectively prepared you for life as an entrepreneur. What worked? What didn't work?
Okay. Greetings to the house at large, and thank you so much for the question. The programs that I participated in is Alan Gray Entrepreneurship Intercollege Program. So I was a student when I applied. In the books, but in my mind I said, I have to do something about what I'm learning. And then again, the program was funded by Absa. So these two programs gave me a clear sense of understanding about entrepreneurship. They give me their realistic understanding, because as soon as you are an entrepreneur, yes, we look at you as someone who has money and automatically you owe us. And then another thing is that it prepared me mentally, because entrepreneurship is filled with setbacks, a slow progress, it's filled with constant problem solving. So I'm going to paint you a picture of what they've done to myself. I used to run my business in a sense that I ran a business of air conditioning and refrigeration. I used to walk past the building. When I see an aircon, I knock. I can do that. I can service. I can do that. That is how I used to do it. And if there's no business, I type a CV. That is how I used to. But after the program, I've learned about strategic management, which is something I was taught from Alan Gray to say, you have to have a skeleton for your business. You're giving your business a structure to say, come what may, come what happens. This is the skeleton for your business. And you wake up every day to ensure that you know what are your threats, you know what are your opportunities, and you wake up every day to work on those things. So whether or not there's something that is coming up, you have to have resilience. They told me the most important aspect, which is financial management. It is cash flow, it is budgeting. I had a golden saying from Absa saying, I'm just going to mention them a lot of times because they took me from Andazi to I know. Yes.
Nice slogan. From Andazi to I know.
To be quite honest, they gave me a golden rule to say a good business must be able to sustain itself. That is where you are able to depict whether you need a grant, you need a loan, or you need to work hard. Because most of the businesses fail. The entrepreneurs fail from the early years. Why? Because there's a loan, they rush to apply for a loan.
Sure.
They later fail to pay back that loan. You see where I'm going. And then again, I was taught an aspect about compliance and governance. That alone opens opportunities.
Yeah.
Because you go to a tender portal, you have to be compliant. They look at your SARS filing, they look at your tax clearance. Opportunities are opened. And when we come again to the governance part, we are looking at the fact that do you have policies that protect your business and your clients? Because a client comes to me and say, okay, I just paid that 20,000 rand for the aircons, please bring them. And I'm driving to them to give them their aircons, only to find that I was given a fraudulent proof of payment.
Sure.
So I need to draft a policy to say, I firstly have to see this in my account. I'm giving you this amount of time in order for me to deliver the service or the product. So I'm having rules, regulations. I'm having the pillars to say, I'm not going there unless this happens. So you're drafting policies to protect your business and your clients. So those are the things that I've learned from the programs. And the other last aspect that is most important is how do you push your sales? How do you market your business? Because the business that is not spoken about is more like no business at all. So they went as far as teaching us about the AI tools. I know the AI has gone us by storms, but fortunately on my side, there's no AI that can install an aircon, I can assure you.
So
that is why I love the fact that one of the speakers, I'm very sorry I forgot the name, said something about skills development.
Yes.
Yes, skills development. You know that if I have this skill, there isn't no way AI can take this away from, can do this for me. So they give me the applications that I can use to administer my business, my invoices, how I put all those social media advertisement for me to market my business. They gave a voice to my business.
wow. So Lerato, let's give Lerato a big round of applause. So Lerato, I want to do two things. I want to pull the poll back up because I want to see how the poll matches with the things that you say are important. Because I don't want to get in trouble with people anymore. And then I'll tell you what the second thing is. So if you can't see there, I'll tell you what the results are. Remember the question was, when you think about what young South Africans most need to become successful entrepreneurs, what do you think is the most critical ingredient? So, Lerato, what the audience has said is that, well, actually, 21% of the audience has said what they need is an entrepreneurial mindset and self-belief. That's 21%. Another 21% says, no, what they need is actual practical business skills and financial literacy. Perhaps let me jump to the biggest one, which is 26%, which says, no, what they need is supportive networks and mentorship. Then we get to 13%, which is saying access to finance and startup resources. 8% says they need a more enabling regulatory and market environment. 8% access to market and potential customers, and 4% exposure to entrepreneurial role models. When you look at that poll and you were to give that an assessment, is that an accurate reflection of what you needed the most to have the story you've just shared with us now?
Okay, I like to paint pictures of what I talk about, so it doesn't seem like I was just told what to say.
Yes.
I registered my business. I registered my business in 2019.
Yeah.
Can I share a background of my business?
Yeah,
Go
for it.
So I registered my business in 2019. And then why did I register my business? I was the only female in a male-dominated industry, an air conditioning company. And then my boss said, Lerato, you are a woman. You have to wash the cars. You have to clean the office. You have to make sure that the storeroom is okay. So when the technicians
You
come,
lost me at wash the cars. Sure.
And mind you, I have a background of electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I pushed that 12 months doing those things. And what I did is when the technicians come back from site, I would ask them, what did you do? How did you do it? You can never refill a gas from the vocal point of, I don't know how you call it. You have to be practical.
Yes.
And then with the rate of unemployment, I resigned because I know my value. I cannot continue to wash cars. I'm not belittling that.
Yes.
But I was angered by the fact that he told me that this is a male-dominated industry, you cannot do it. And then I registered my business out of anger, to be quite honest.
Let me pause you there. So can we flash up that poll? Because there is a place for anger here. And so it's that 21%, right? The entrepreneurial mindset that says, this is not my portion. The washing cars is not my portion. And then number two, it's the self-belief to say, actually, I am capable. Yeah. So, Lerato, thank you so much. Before I move on from you, just very quickly, if you have an aircon in your office, please put your hand up. There they are, Lerato. There they are. So when we talk sales and marketing in the flow, that's what we mean. Thank you for that. And I'm grateful that you took the time to share your story, because therein we actually get the granular understanding of what actually matters the most. So I have a round of questions, but my second device is literally buzzing because there have been so many questions that have come through for all of you. So I'm going to try my best to integrate these as best as possible. So I'm going to go to the newest ones. All right. So Nonhlanhla, let me double click first here and then I'll come back to you for this one, because I think this is quite important. When we think about the Absa model, it's built on this idea that there is a progression that can happen from mindset to intent to action, just as we've heard in Lerato's story. But we also know is that young people don't always follow a very neat developmental arc that kind of follows our theory of change and all of the things we speak about. In practice then, how do you design and deliver programs that have enough flexibility in them to meet young people where they are, and then for the theory of change to meet them at that point?
Yeah, thanks, Nozipho. I think it's important to still note that there's a progression pathway.
Yes.
Right? To say mindset development is critical. From mindset development, then you drive or increase intent. Research says what the difference between mindset and action is actually increasing intent. Intent speaks to decision making.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to acknowledge that that pathway is important, because going back to what Zamkita was saying, you are developing various entrepreneurial competencies as you go throughout that pathway. So that's important to acknowledge. But in terms of the Absa model, our execution framework, we speak about meeting young people where they are. We recognize, just going back to the points that you were speaking to Dr. Kumba Pout, to say there's young people within a schooling context, right? We meet them where they are. They are in school. We are not saying every young person in school must go start a business. So there it's about entrepreneurial mindset development. We are teaching them to have the agency that Lerato has taught us about now, to say, I actually made a decision to say, this is not for me. So there we are saying, show up differently. Is an issue in your family, is an issue in your school, is an issue in your community, is an issue in your country. Begin to think broadly beyond saying, okay, there's a problem here, but you then say, how do I think broadly about solutioning for those problems? Then we say there's a young person who's in higher education or training, so we recognize that they're different, they're in different spaces. Higher education and training, we are saying positioning entrepreneurship as a potential career of choice. We are saying you are about to exit the higher education and training space, whether it's TVETs with the Alan and Jill Gray Philanthropies entity, whether it's universities with the University of South Africa EDHE program, you are about to get a qualification. And the question is, are you prepared to be an unemployed graduate? And we're saying that can't be an option for you. You're about to get a qualification that can unlock earning opportunities for you. So there we are saying, think about entrepreneurship as a potential career of choice. So we increase intent for them to pursue entrepreneurial action. Then lastly, we say there are young people who are not in employment, education or training. For them, you don't have time to say, oh, mindset development, and then you are saying they need to get into economic activity now. And the question is, how do you then equip them to go on a journey of entrepreneurial action? So there we upskill them. We're saying you are needing a skill. What kind of a skill are we giving you at this point so that you can show up and go earn an income? So we, for example, partnered with the David Tlale Academy, where we are teaching them in terms of the textile industry. We've partnered with Legends Academy, where we are teaching them barbering. Some people can think, oh, barbering. Why would you want to teach young people barbering? I want you to go research in terms of how much money barbers actually make, right? And I mean, look at how successful Sheldon actually is just from starting a barbering business. So there we are saying, give them a skill, but it's important to take that skill side by side, still teach them about entrepreneurship, because as Lerato was highlighting, the various skills that you are needing to be able to manage a business, you teach them that, and then you say, here's money, go start. Because it's important to then capacitate, give them a skill, and then you give them the resources to be able to start. So we look at it, we say, yes, there's a pathway, it's important, but also we recognize that there are different seasons of their journey. Therefore, it's important to meet them where they are.
So that flexibility is built into the approach, because you will find young people at different parts of their own journey. I just want to bring this quick follow-up question to you. It's from Nompumelelo Jack. Very quickly, and I think this is quite important, because Nompumelelo is asking, how is Absa leveraging inclusive finance and other support structures to help entrepreneurs, especially those from underrepresented communities, to scale their businesses and to contribute to broader economic activity? And if I were to paraphrase, this is, for me, is saying, how are you leveraging across the group to support entrepreneurs, not just to become entrepreneurs, but to really scale? So we start talking about moving beyond national markets and so on. How does Absa show up there?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So when I spoke about an ecosystem, we look at both the internal ecosystem as well as the external ecosystem. We talk about shared value delivery and how we deliver the work that we do as corporate citizenship. And what that means for us is amplification of social impact, but also unlocking commercial value. So in unlocking commercial value, we're saying, how do we utilize the entire, or leverage the entire Absa ecosystem to enable an amplification of social outcomes? But as business strives, you're also able to invest more money in terms of social investing. Going back to how we leverage the Absa ecosystem, we talk about moving from pathwaying young people into entrepreneurial action, which is what we do within the corporate citizenship area, or your typical social investing area, or your typical corporate social investing department. Then we've got a conversation with our enterprise development colleagues. We're saying we can't get these young people to start businesses, and then what? Who's then going to back them up to ensure that the businesses that have now been started are on a journey of success? From enterprise development, we are saying, but do we have a value proposition for a young entrepreneur, for a woman entrepreneur, a product that speaks specifically to them? So business banking, SME, becomes critical in the conversation to say, but What's your youth CVP, youth entrepreneur CVP, your woman entrepreneur CVP, to ensure that you are giving them the relevant products? Then we are having a conversation about access to markets. Speaking about access to markets, the Absa stall is dedicated to a young person who's selling honey. Please do go and support that young person.
Yeah.
So to the business, you're then saying access to markets. You're then having a conversation with our corporate and investment banking colleagues to say, we've got all these CIB clients. How do you then, bet on these businesses? Then we're having a conversation with procurement to say we're spending so much money on procuring goods and services. We've got these entrepreneurs. If we are not their first backers, then who's going to support them? So it's an entire ecosystem that was worked together to ensure they thrive. I mean, we can set them up, but we can set them up for failure as corporate citizenship if we don't unlock the various support mechanisms within the business.
And I think that's quite important, because the commercial lens also means that you have a vested interest in their sustained success. Otherwise, it's actually money thrown away for the most part. Thank you for that, Nonhlanhla. Zimkita, let me bring you back into the conversation. One of the comments that Clement made just as he left stage, he spoke about the importance of really looking at things at a systemic level. And so I want to bring this question to you, is that when we look at the Inspire program, you've managed to expand this from just a focus on technical and vocational education into a system-wide approach. My question to you is, what has this broader reach revealed, and how has that sharpened your thinking and the organization's thinking about how we land entrepreneurial education that can have systemic impact and system-wide impact?
Sure. Thank you so much. I think maybe if I can broadly first is talk about what the Inspire program does. So what it aims to do is to look at entrepreneurship education across the value chain. I think earlier you spoke about why can't we start early? So why can't we start at primary school? What does that look like? What does it look like at high school? What does it look like at TVET colleges? Shout out for TVET, they can't be replaced by AI. What does it look like at TVET, and also what does it look like in higher education? So it was sort of from a philanthropic perspective to say, how do we see that sort of across from beginning right up to the end of the value chain? And as we've sort of been working in the system and thinking, how do we move from programs are important, but programs are limited in their reach.
Yes.
Our resources are limited, the problem is big, and if we're honest, most of our funded programs in this space, they tend to be in Gauteng and the Western Cape. They don't include other provinces where even the unemployment is much worse than it is in Gauteng as well in the Western Cape. So part of what this has surfaced for us, firstly, is the importance of partnerships. Partnerships are critical. You hear Ellen Gray's in partnerships with Absa. We're in partnership with some of the people sitting in the room. In some instances, we're providing funding to other organizations. So firstly, it's told us that it is incredibly important for all organizations that are in this space, especially in entrepreneurship education, to collaborate, to partner, to share resources, to share knowledge, so that these resources can scale to other provinces where sometimes we're not necessarily represented. The second one, especially for funders and philanthropists like ourselves, that sometimes these short-term commitments that we get to give, we understand we've got accountabilities, but unless we are committing into this system and we are committing into it for the long term, we will have programs where we start and stop. We never see the entire value of them, or some of the implementing partners have to spend year in and year out fundraising, year in and year out fundraising. So it requires us to be able to think about this entire problem at a systemic level and a collaboration level. And I think thirdly is the importance of government, is the importance of the Department of Education. Most schools, education is a government priority. They are a very important stakeholder. And there's a place where philanthropy, CSI programs can play in de-risking solutions, in going first, in creating proof of concept. However, for a systemic uptake, you need government to be at the table and to partner with you systemically. And I think that this is what has taught us. And as Edward was saying, you can't have impact tomorrow. You're going to have early signals, and those early signals are important to tell you whether you're going the right way or you're going the wrong way, and where you need to adjust your program.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's quite a comprehensive response that helps us to really appreciate what it takes to evolve to systemic impact. And what I want to do is, you've thrown the baton to Edwell. I want to bring him in on this. And Edwell, it's a two-pronged question. The question for me is that if we think about university-based programs, for the most part, the target is students who are already in some sort of formalized institution, right? They're in a system, they're in an institution. What happens to those who make up a much larger part of the population of young people in the country who never make it to university? Do you think there's a role for university in terms of a broader reach into the ecosystem outside of their own sort of boundaries of their institution? So that's the question. But the reason I say it's a double question is because I want to bring this question from Kelly to you as well as you think about this response. Because Kelly says high schools, TVETs, universities, she says these are all formal pathways and they only work for a percentage of a youth, which is kind of the point that I'm trying to land with this question. But Kelly goes on to say, what is your view on micro-credentials? And I want to paraphrase that and to say, is the thinking behind micro-credentials taking root? And are universities opening themselves up to that as an alternative way of thinking about broadening the reach of people who can get access to formal entrepreneurial education?
Yeah, thank you. I think, firstly, let me start by saying, there is the concept of the quadruple helix. That looks at the ecosystem that consists of government, civil society, the academic sector, the university, as well as corporate, which is business. So these four work together to achieve economic outcomes. So talking about the university, yes, only a few of the youth actually are privileged to get a university education. Currently, our 26 public universities have around 1.1 million students at any given year. What's the population of the youth in the country? So that's a very small population. But what is the value of universities in the quadruple helix? What is the value of the universities to society at large? Universities create knowledge. I think that's the background of universities. And so the key thing is, what do we do with that knowledge? We cannot keep that knowledge confined within the universities, because traditional universities used to be there,
Yeah.
Only a few will make there, and even what comes out of there was also confined to academic journals that are read by academics. But we have debunked that. We've actually changed that. University, the 21st century university is actually changing. And what's the change? Even when you talk about entrepreneurship education, we are not talking about a course that is taught maybe in the faculties of commerce, law, and management. No, we're talking about skills that are embedded, cutting across all the faculties. So we're talking about a skill. So we see entrepreneurship as a skill. That when these university students and graduates then have got that skill, they don't exist in isolation. They are members of community. They are part of society. Then they use those skills, the new knowledge that they've generated. For example, there are some of your researchers that come up with very innovative products, but have no interest in commercializing, because that's not the interest. The interest is only focused on research. So the value of the university, through even the university incubators, through the tech transfer offices, is to open up that new knowledge that is generated at university. Say, how do we commercialize it? Share that knowledge with entrepreneurs outside of the university sector. Now that's stepping into the community, into the social part of the quadruple helix. And then in terms of the question to say micro-credentials, actually there is a huge uptake. Most of our universities actually see that education is changing. I think even in the next 2 decades or so, or even a decade, we'll see a huge shift in terms of education. Questions are being thrown through research to say, Is there a value of someone going to a one university for 4 years, studying the same thing? What about you do a micro course here, micro credentials, you package it there, because what you need is a skill.
Yeah.
And you can get that skill through micro credentials. And those micro credentials, what happens is, even thanks to COVID, because it also opened us to opportunities that people can actually study in different places.
Yeah.
Students are able to register for these micro credentials outside of the university. Because what you need is a skill. Maybe you want to learn about innovation, maybe in the health sector, for example. You can actually take a micro credentials course in microbiology, etc. That opens up.
So thank you very much. I think Kelly will be happy with that as well to hear, because we've been hearing the conversation on micro-credentials for a while, but it's good to hear that the uptake has been positive. And that universities are actively supporting the incorporation of micro-credentials in the learning journey. But also the points you make about universities always having been part of the social tapestry and the fabric, and always thinking beyond just their university walls, especially universities that have physical structures, always locating themselves in the broader economy. So in the last minute or so, Lerato, when we spoke earlier, you spoke about all of the gifts, if I could call them that you'd received from the program that you had gone through, and how that set you up for your entrepreneurial journey. What I'm interested now is that once you had stepped into your journey, if you could highlight a singular challenge that you think keeps rearing its head, is a stubborn challenge that the people in this room who have a deep interest in supporting and understanding entrepreneurs, if that's where they could focus, what is the one lived experience challenge that you really wish could be solved for entrepreneurs?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. The challenge is that I have a business, I've registered a business, I want to empower someone, but I cannot afford to pay for that intern. That is the challenge that I was facing, to pay for that intern. What I can do is to upskill them. So when I'm giving them the skill, they can be able to go and register their own business or continue to work for me. So the program didn't just leave me with all those key aspects of running a business. They funded me. So after funding me, so with that amount that I got from Absa, they said, go and apply these aspects that we've put in you. So I was able to grow it. I didn't blow it, I grew it.
Come on, come on. And I just want to say, if you didn't get that joke, you need to go back to being a South African 101. Go for it.
So now I was able to actually have that technician that I rely on, because before I couldn't have a technician that I work with. Remember, I get a job, I don't get a job. It's up and down situation. I call you, don't come, don't come. So after being able to get the funds, I was now focusing on the bigger projects, because I was able to purchase all those tools that I needed. And after purchasing the tools that I needed, I was no longer redirecting my business. I'm no longer redirecting my business. I'm doing business myself. And then with that amount, I'm able to pay for that technician, and we are working together.
Sure.
Not to say, I used to work with technician A. When there's no job, he goes to look for a job somewhere. Now I have to go to train another one and work with that person, and it's time consuming. So now I'm able to have that one that I rely on to say, you are working with me now. We are together in this thing. So the challenge that I had was that I was unable to afford a person that I should work with.
And what I'm hearing you say, and I thank you for that, is that in this moment, we frame the challenge as I was unable to afford a person that I needed to work with. But as we talk about scale, one can imagine that the conversation becomes, I'm unable to build a team. I'm unable to build the capacity that I need to actually tap into the market opportunities and. So I think there's a broader conversation around how do we then support entrepreneurs, whether it's plugging in with the seaters, or just what is the hiring insights that we could give them so that entrepreneurs actually fulfill the ultimate ambition, which is to create jobs in the economy. Now, as you can all see, the monitor is flashing red, telling us that our time is over, but I'm not going to let you go without a billboard. We need a billboard, and then I'm going to release you as we all go to lunch. So here's your billboard. One thing that you think could improve the success rate of a generation of entrepreneurs. So one thing that could improve the success rate of a generation of entrepreneurs, and it's a billboard. Right? You can look away, Edwell. I'm going to come to you in any event. It's a billboard. So, Nonhlanhla, I don't know if that's a side eye or it's a looking straight on, but I'll take it. So, I can even help you. So, your billboard will start with our next generation of entrepreneurs, and then you complete the sentence. Our next generation of entrepreneurs, you complete the sentence. Nonhlanhla, you go.
You know,
it can't start there.
Okay, so for us, we talk about where talent meets opportunity.
Yes.
Right, and I think for me, it's still kind of a billboard
Sure.
kind of positioning, because just like Hein was saying, you know, all they need is opportunity. So our young people are incredibly talented. All we are doing is unlocking opportunity. So
So what's the billboard?
Talent meets opportunity.
Talent meets
so that's
opportunity.
self-belief, to know that they are incredibly talented. All they need is just the opportunity to unlock their next I grew it moment.
Thank you. Talent meets opportunity for an I grew it moment. Let's give Nonhlanhla a big round of applause. All right. Hey, Zimkita actually looks excited for this. Okay.
No, I
Zimkita.
don't have a billboard. I was excited by the needs. To say needs are not a homogeneous group, by the way.
Needs.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
people
okay.
know there are doctors that are needs, lawyers that are needs, there are graduates, undergraduates, and I think as a sector, when we talk about people not in employment, training, education as needs, if we treat them as a homogeneous group, we're going to miss it. We need to segment them well, target them well, and support them well.
So that's a really good point and a very defiant posture to the billboard. So
all right.
needs are not a homogeneous group, and we need to think about them in their various differences.
In this entrepreneurship journey as well.
And your billboard?
My billboard, I'll borrow from the words of Mr. Alan Gray, and I will say that business can be used for social good.
Love it. Business can be used for social good. Let's give Zimkita a round of applause. The most important person in any panel always goes last, right? So Lerato, I'm going to come to you last. Dr. Edwell, what's your billboard?
I think my billboard, I'll follow you, what you say. It said our next generation of entrepreneurs, I think they need market access.
Market access.
We can talk all we can provide all the funding, all the loans, all the equity funding. If we don't open up the market for them to sell their products, we will be back to point zero. So our next generation of entrepreneurs need market access.
Needs market access. We'll take that. Lerato, you can use my beginning, you can use your own, but it just needs to be a billboard. Absa, checkbook for the billboards, right? You're paying for all of these. What is your billboard?
Okay, can I please come back to the billboard? Can I just say a small something, even if it's flashing? Can I say something?
I've never been defied so much as a moderator. But you go ahead. Let's give you 30 seconds.
Entrepreneurship, let's treat it like a learning institution, because it's a practical aspect. You are most likely to teach 100 individuals about entrepreneurship during a 3-day workshop, but only one out of them can do it. What I wanted to say to the entrepreneurship program is to say, open up applications, please. Open up application for the people that have the mindset, so you know that you are working on someone who already knows what they want. When you open up that program, you take them through an incubation program. You're saying, if your target is to empower 12 entrepreneurs in 1 year, take them 12 as they are. An idea or an existing business or a smaller business, take them as they are. Instill those skills in them. Halfway through the line, fund them. And then you are able to get a helicopter view of all those individuals to say, this one is weak here, this one is stronger here, I can instill something here like this, other than generalizing entrepreneurship to all of them. They have their individual challenges, personally and in the respective businesses.
Got you.
That is what I just wanted to say, Smolanga. It's a lot to say, but due to time, can I say my billboard?
Okay, but you can't duck the billboard. I'm still waiting. What's the billboard?
The billboard says entrepreneurship is a problem-solving aspect. You look at a problem, you solve it, and then solving that problem, you ensure that the ecosystem is okay, and this is my billboard. Now I'm done. My billboard says, we know what problem to solve. Please, give us the skills and the fund.
There we go. Thank you very much. Let's give my panelists a big round of applause.